but I will say that the trend shows that 2022 is going to be a critical year for us. And I think people in the cities, especially, are going to be waking up here, and they're going to be going, wow, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to get food? Like,
Is 2022 the year we see capital rotation out of risk assets like crypto and stocks, jumping into safe haven assets like gold? Gold investors haven't been losing sleep over the stock market's taper tantrum, with Blackstone warning of a lost decade, quote unquote, where stock market returns are anemic. We have Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo all forecasting gold over $2,000 an ounce in 2022, and Bloomberg says there's the potential for $3,000 per ounce on their price targets. Learn how simple it is to add physical gold and silver to your portfolio ahead of the rise in inflation and predicted price rises. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver. Call 1-800-356-4470 and get a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer from 2016 to present, click on the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video. And good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Raymond. Remember, he and I did March 2017 an interview, The Real Martian. You'll find that in my playlist, where we were talking about agriculture, indoor agriculture in snowy and cold weather environments. And he had developed his own systems to work in a greenhouse, even in snowbound up to waist-high snow that was still producing on an automated fashion. And that's when we first connected. That's been a long time, 2017. But since that time, he has won, Motherboard. It's a very famous site. A lot of people will know that for the tech and different innovations here that's around the planet. And there's so many ways to go with Motherboard, with the articles there. Human of the Year for bioregenerative food and energy production systems. Now, that's a huge compliment, because what he's also been working on recently fits right into the same mold of some of these problems we're experiencing with food production, supply chain constraints that are getting a little more, let's say, amplified. And we're going to walk through this in a couple of ways here. First, we're going to discuss the problem, and then we're going to discuss the solutions, because it's great to talk about a problem, and you could do that all day long and just feed the fear. But what about a solution that people know they can take action, know that there is a possibility for them to move through this the best way possible, with the best chance of, still living and thriving during these changes. This is a cycle change. We're at the very beginning of it. So it's not going to be a 1 day, a 2 week, or something like this, a 1 month event, and then it's finished and everything reverts back to the way it was. It's going to take several generations to move through this. It's not going to be a 1 day, 1 week. So think of it as a multi-generation thing, where what we're building now is, go back to the 1900s when they were coming out of horse and wagon, moving over to automobile transportation. This is the same thing. The countryside movement into the cities, and that whole build out of what we know as modern civilization from the countryside. Well, now it seems it's exhaling, and people are leaving the cities back to the countryside. And there's a lot of, feelings, I guess, sixth sense, if you want to call it that things have changed. They're going to continue to change. We're going to have to think of different fashions to get through life in itself. And one of the base things is food, no society, no food, no civilization. So it keeps coming back to this again. Food is going to be the most important thing in our lives, and you're going to want to have nutritious foods and be able to supply and provide for your families or yourselves and others too. So that's how I kind of wanted to frame it for today. So Jeff, I appreciate you joining me again. Many things to talk about. And plus you have Eden Grow Systems, which is also what we wanted to talk about today, different tower grows. And this is going to be a solution-based episode more than it is, talking about the problem. But we do need to frame it on what both Jeff and I see in the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, before you might realize why you want to think about indoor ag or greenhouses or just ag in general that you can put some automation into. So Jeff, thanks for joining.
Yeah, David, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, hearing you say 2017, it's like, wow, where did all of that time go? I mean, time is truly flying by, and of course, a global pandemic and everything that we're dealing with kind of speeds things up a little bit. You kind of lose track of what is going on out there. It's just moving so fast. You know, as I get older, it seems like it's moving way too fast. I hear that that's just going to continue to go. But yeah, talking about framing the problems, you know, and of course, one of the things you and I have spoken about is I really believe that the good Lord has blessed me with the opportunity to be with people like yourself, to be with people of the team that I have at Eden. And he's provided us funds and skills to be able to come up with solutions to help people through challenging times. Like, it's one thing to sit there and say, hey, things are going bad. It's another thing to say, hey, things are going bad, and here's something that can help make it not so bad. So it doesn't have to suck as bad. And I will say that if you look at what we're going to end up talking about today, you need to go back and watch Dave's original videos from back in 2017. Even before that, you need to go back and watch others, Oppenheimer Ranch, Ice Age Farmer, everybody else that's out there. This discussion about what's happening in the world and what's happening with food is not something that's just happening because prices in the market are going up today. This is not in reaction to a headline on CNN or MSNBC that says the price of lettuce is 200% increase, and oh my goodness, it's Donald Trump's fault. No, that is smokescreen for the fact that this has been talked about for over 5 years, that this is going to happen. And Dave, you should feel a sense of vindication for what it is that you've put up with, what you've gone through, because the stuff that you've been putting out, I didn't just believe you when I saw your stuff. I went and pulled the Maunder minimum information myself from NASA. I compared it to trends. I looked at it. I cross-referenced. I look at different publications and stuff, and then I just watch. And the interesting thing about what we're seeing happen in the weather is the trends that you and others, because it's historical trends, I don't mean this offensively, but what you have found is the trend. And you just told people about it. It's not like it's some hidden thing that you have to be a super scientist to figure out. Normal people can actually watch what's gone on in history, and you can see that this trend of the climate is changing, but it's not changing because of just car or cow farts. It's changing because it's supposed to change. It's part of a cyclical nature of the system that we live in. And as a systems engineer, I get that. Systems go through ups, they go through downs, the sine wave nature of things. It's what we're going through. And again, for the people who are just tuning in, I want to encourage you, go back and look. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is something that Dave and others have been putting out for a while. This is happening. It's going to get a lot worse. And what we mean is food. Food availability is what it all comes down to. Forget everything else. You need to eat, you need to drink, you need to be secure, the basics. Maslow's, you're going to get right down to the bottom of it. And I cannot encourage everybody enough. If you have land, plant food now. You're already late, but it's never too late to start growing. You need to get your seeds, you need to go through the process, because as we've shown on The Real Martian, like, you just don't go and start planting food and get it. It is something that is a process. It is a journey. You need to go thank a farmer. I'll put it that way. You need to thank them, shake their hand and say, thank you for what you do, because what they do is, quite frankly, miracle working. And it's growing food's hard. And what we want to do with the solution is we want to get it to make it easier. We want to help you get through that learning curve. And that's what we've done on The Real Martian, and what I'm going to talk to you about today on the Eat and Grow System. So back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that praise. Well, I saw something that was against the narrative. So when you don't go with the narrative and you don't follow 100% with the talking points that you're supposed to regurgitate to echo through the society, and coming out, I'm going to go a little woo-woo here. I'm going to say unequivocally that the reason the world is moving in different shapes and fashions to control access to food, as we're starting to see slowly, drip fed in here, where you can buy food, what you have to do to go into stores to get food. I'm saying that somebody in power knew these cycles were repeating now. And this was going to be a huge problem, because hungry people are angry mobs. There's no way to control them. They can go through and do the psychological studies on an impetus of what it would do, and then what kind of emotion response you would have, and what the outcome would be on almost everything out there. That has been mapped for 100 years. Hundreds of billions of dollars spent in all these psychological studies on if I stimulate this way, you're going to move and do this pretty much as the outcome, and they figure the number of outcomes, and then they can determine from there. The only thing they can't really figure out, because the body goes back into that base mode for survival, is starvation and food, deficit of food. Your brain works differently. Your behaviors, or you're off at just a hair trigger, and feeding your family becomes the most important thing. So out of all the studies they've done for well more than 100 years, you're going to have to go back even in the 1800s. Food and starvation is the thing that is uncontrollable for a society. So now, if you knew this cycle was here again, it would affect food production and the economy. Maybe you would want to control that more tightly before it would get out of control. And, that's about all I'm going to say on that. But, the years of study I've done, it seems like a lot of things have been pre-positioned for this particular time right now to control the masses that are going to be incredibly angry when their food prices get so high that they can't afford it, or it's just not available. And just from the farmers, they are miracle workers. And I'm glad you brought that up. As long as they have the inputs. And this is one thing we're looking at this year, is the fertilizer is not going to be available. And I have some numbers that I've been looking at for at least 8 months now after seeing that CF Industries report. 12% globally is the average that they're going to just put out there for a global average of non-availability of fertilizer for farmers. Now, I can tell you right now, if you do not have a registered farm, you are going to have a difficult time accessing fertilizers and herbicides as the average person going into a farm co-op if you're going to buy in bulk. You can still get it from Home Depot, but it's probably going to be 5x, 8x higher as we get in through May and June when the planting season really starts. And one last caveat here, Jeff, the herbicides that they run in the rows of corn. Now, grasses, you got to break different plants into two types. We got grass and then broadleaf. Well, when you plant corn, mainly it's grasses that emerge in the field rows. So they need glyphosate, Roundup, whatever you like to call it. That's not going to be there. And with the fertilizer prices going up 400% already before planting, a lot of farmers are switching away and just say, we're not going to grow corn. We're going to move over to soybean or other bean varieties. They got clay peas and different types of field beans, et cetera. Black-eyed peas. There's a whole bunch of beans that are going to be grown this year. Some will be more specialty crop. Some will be more mainstream, like for crush, soybean. The herbicides are already affecting to the point where we're going to have a corn shortage coming in. And if you look at the supermarket, the average supermarket, almost everything's corn based. Even our fuel supply that does ethanol is in there. So there's going to be a huge disruption in the corn market. And I don't know if it's going to be a feedback loop where the media then starts to say, hey, there's a food shortage, to encourage people to buy more to create an artificial shortage, or if it's just going to let to be run and people will figure it out on their own. I'm not sure. But that's like an instant inbound May of this year, just a couple of months, when the planting starts and the farmers start talking about how they don't have the inputs. And then you can do simple math and you can figure out what the yields are going to decline because the input's not there. It's pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio, at least what I've heard. Herbicides will have a certain amount of bushel reductions per acre, depending on the amount not applied to control the leaves, to control the weeds, because they're trying to get the same exact nutrients that the target species is, let's say soybean. But the fertilizer that you're putting in there is the food for both. And then the fertilizer is not going to be there. So you're looking at this downward spiral of one affects the other, affects the other, affects the other. So that's how I see the food getting really important, really expensive, and it being kind of the center point of all conversation moving forward after May. I don't know if you'd agree with that or if you're seeing something similar, but at least that's where I'll put it at the moment here.
Yeah, you're obviously closer to the information side of things, and I'm more closer to the technology and building the solution side. But I would say 2022 is going to be a key year for everybody's. I think their eyes are going to be open to what's going on. I think we're seeing that globally. I think we're seeing that people are now going, I could take a lot, but this does not smell right. It does not pass the sniff test. And when I go to the grocery store and I see shelves in America, we're not used to this stuff. So when we see it, everybody else has already been hurting for a while because we're spoiled children over here. But I think 2022, we're going to see it. I read this book once. It says something about a day's wages for a loaf of bread. And we're seeing that happen. We're seeing things that have been forecasted for a while. They're all occurring. I'm not a huge date setter or anything like that because I just don't have enough information. But I will say that the trend shows that 2022 is going to be a critical year for us. And I think people in the cities, especially, are going to be waking up here, and they're going to be going, "Wow, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to get food?" Like, I heard this story once. I think it's probably an urban legend. They asked some kids in the city, where does your food come from? And their answer was Trader Joe's. And they're like, that's true. That is a very true statement. But that wasn't the intent of the question. And it's sad that unfortunately that is the direct answer. The food comes from the ground, it comes from the earth, it comes from farmers doing good work. And I think the people in the cities, especially, I think they're going to start to feel a pinch here. That's going to, and the evidence shows that that is occurring. I mean, we're seeing mass exodus from cities. We're seeing people getting out of Dodge, and they're going to places where they have some land and they can be a little bit away from things. They're more secure, and they can grow food and decisions. But not everybody has the money for a home. There's a lot of underprivileged folks that are stuck in apartments that just can't go do that. And what are we going to do about them? And at Eden, the Real Martian, what we're doing, and we think we have solutions for those people. We're going to talk about it later, but when I talk about the stuff that we're doing, it's easy for people on my channel to be like, why don't you just grow food in a garden? Well, of course, if you have a garden, you should be growing food in it. I'm not going to tell you that my system's better than a garden unless you don't have a garden, and then my system rocks it. Like you can't beat it. So, but I think back to your exact question, I think 2022 is going to be a pivotal year. I think we have some key things on our horizon that are really going to shape the geopolitical as well as just the environmental. The environmental that we see right now, the huge push of cold air coming down in the Americas and hitting. Now our Eden is based out of Houston. It's colder in Houston right now than it is at 2,400 feet in the Pacific Northwest up in the Cascade Mountains. They're in the 30s today, and we're up in the 40s, which, by the way, if you look at the modern minimum mapping that NASA has, that David has available on his site, he usually always links it in pretty much every video, you'll see that's exactly what we're supposed to see. We're supposed to see a cooling with little pockets of warm, and some of those pockets of warm, let's see if Alaska sound familiar, Pacific Northwest, how about Greenland? Those are things that if we look at the maps, we look at the recreation from NASA that David has put up and made available, and others, we're going to see exactly what we're starting to see. And we're going to see that huge push of cold air that comes down, and that's what's going on. It happened last year. It's happening again this year. It's going to keep happening. So environmentally, crops, North Dakota, they had a late spring because of the thaw. It took forever. The entire Midwest last year, it's amazing we got any food out of them at all. And then we had the huge derecha. We're seeing the environmental impacts that were discussed over 5 years ago, over 10 years ago by others. We are seeing it. So I think it's really going to be manifest this year because of what we went through the last few years. The springs have been bad and the winters come early. The freezes have come early for most folks, and the ground's just junk. And that's leaving off all the stuff we've done to the land. Geopolitically, there's a few things going on. We have Ukraine happening in Europe for everybody over across our pond, our brothers and sisters over there. We're praying for you guys, but that whole move in Ukraine, I think it's all about natural gas, but I'm not a politician. I think it's about Russia controlling Europe's energy. And we're seeing moves there. We're seeing the price of energy in Europe go up through the roof. We've seen some bad decisions by policymakers on technology. Why are you getting rid of nuclear power plants and putting up windmills that don't work when it's not windy? Like, what's going on there? You're making bad decisions. But if Ukraine pops, and then we have, again, I believe, with the lack of stability in the United States right now, and our role being diminished because Americans are Americans and we kind of screwed it up. I got to call myself out there. I should have voted a lot more, but I should have been engaged a lot more. But now the mess is here, and it's partially my fault. So I won't be a finger pointer. I'll point it right at me and say I'm part of the problem here. But I would say that with our diminished position in the world, and we look at what's going on with Russia now, there's no reason for Russia not to do what they want to do. I mean, I would if I was them. And then if Russia pops, then I would expect sometime after the Olympics, we'll see Taiwan. And we already have a global chip shortage. And I have on my screen here ready to share for us later. But at Eden, we keep a list of risk for our supply chain. I have a person, our vice president of manufacturing production. His job is to get us out of China, and he's doing a great job. But he's keeping track of the risk. And China has stopped the phosphate exports. They've stopped magnesium exports, which are key not only for nutrients, magnesium for plants, they need it, but for aluminum is a big deal. And then we also have, they've stopped urea shipments, which sounds kind of disgusting, but it's key for fertilizer, which you've alluded to before. So I see, and then we have the midterm elections coming up. So we've got three big geopolitical things that are going on right now, in addition to the environment. And then, oh yeah, let's throw the pandemic and let's go ahead and throw inflation on top of all that. And we've got ourselves a big pile of poo, and it stinks to high heaven. And I think people need to start getting ready for it in a real way. And I'm not talking about going and poking your head in the hole. You need to build community. You need to get together. You need to do like what Dave and I are doing. We're different people, but we came together, we were brought together, and we're sharing, we're using the skills, the talents that God has given us. And we're trying to get out to people and get them aware and get solutions to you. So with that, I'll turn it back. That's my answer to, I think it's 2022 is going to be key.
And the big pile of poo, I wonder if we could biocompost that or. Yeah.
I got a digester. We could take the poo and turn it into liquid nutrients, liquid gold. We can do that.
Yeah, they do that in Nepal quite a bit too. So, it's proven technology, biogas, look it up. You can supply a city with power if you use all the refuse from a city.
Yeah,
excuse
absolutely.
me. And I wanted to throw in Tonga, the eruption, because I found a lot more information on the Southern Hemisphere cooling for the Maunder minimum. It's mainly based in the Northern Hemisphere for a lot of the studies that were done. There's been a few new maps of people going through the information, synthesizing all these data points. And not only was Argentina and Brazil most heavily affected as you look around for the cooling in those temperature reconstruction maps for the Maunder minimum, but at the same time with Tonga, the ash that's going around the planet, it's across the hemisphere, between the hemispheres now, but just let's focus on the Southern Hemisphere for a moment on crop production there. So what I did is I went through all the countries in the Southern Hemisphere and looked at their crop production map if they're in planting, mid-season, or harvest now, because the ash is going to create a lot of acid rain down there. There's going to be particulates blocking sun. Weather patterns are going to change because there's more nuclei for droplets to form. There'll be more precipitation, and just a lot of things are going to change. So I was looking right now, as they're already, forecasting to put it in the books, Argentina is going to be one of the most heavily affected countries. So all you have to do yourself is you can go to the USDA crop maps and then look in to see which continent has which countries and go by the country and see where they sit in there. Like I say, the mid planting is what you're looking at right now, the mid growth stage, because that's where all the uptake's happening. That's where the final maturation for the kernel sizes, ear sizes happens. But if it's acid rain and things are a little bit different, if it's too wet or there's not enough sunlight, that's going to really, really affect the yields coming out of there. Not a lot of people want to talk about that. But another thing with Ukraine, it's the largest breadbasket in that part of Eastern Europe. And Kazakhstan also supplies 10 million, that's right, 10 million tons of grain over to China. And it's just really quirky, in my own opinion, geopolitically, that Kazakhstan has these huge problems, but it's a swing grain producer, 10 million tons. And you come over to the Ukraine and you get about 8+ million tons out of there. So these are two gigantic breadbaskets, and both of them geopolitically right now, I think they're going for the food in addition to the energy. Both. And I think
that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think as time, spins forward, it would not surprise me if China went into Myanmar, because, having bought coffee down there, and that's how I originally got into this.
That's right.
And by the way, the guys who were doing it way before me, John Casey, Dr. Tim Ball, Anthony Watts at WhatsApp with that, Dr. Roy Spencer, who runs the University of Alabama, Huntsville satellite data sets there that are the most reliable, non-biased of the satellite temperatures for global warming or cooling, whichever way you look at it. Like, there were a lot of people prior to me saying, whoa, we got a huge thing coming in here also with cycles, and they're going to try to cover it up. The excuse was already made when the changes occurred, so the global populace would not have such a reaction to it because it was already explained that this is going to happen because you're doing XYZ activity. Okay, if you limit that activity, we can change the weather patterns back so they're not so out of kilter. So the excuse was built in, so it doesn't seem such a scary thing. It's like, already we can do something about it, or governments might plan to do something about it, but it's all about having that excuse ready. Because if you explain it to the global populace, like you and I are talking, oh, by the way, this is a multi-century, multi-millennia event. Societies usually collapse, restructure themselves, the economy shatters, re-rises in a different shape or form because value needs to take new form because people aren't working the same jobs. They're not producing the same goods. Same transportation network is not there to deliver something of value that then can be taxed, or everything breaks down and has to be restructured again. Hence cryptocurrencies at the same time coming in, and all these new pillars of a new type of monetary system, from carbon allocation credits and everything in between to the crypto, to the gold, to silver. There's so many things that they're going to have to restructure a currency on, global or within a nation, to ping value to that again. This all shatters every one of these events. So if you knew that, would you tell the populace what's going on? Or would you let them figure it out on their own? Because to tell people this 5 years ago, if it was on the front page news of every newspaper, people would have panicked 5 years ago before what we're seeing now. So, the fear that's in the media, or the messaging to prevent fear or create fear, is all through the media. So obviously they didn't want people spooked at that time, but they sure do now, because the messaging across everywhere is shortage, hyperinflation, prices up, your lifestyle is going to go down, your lifestyle is going to be diminished. And that's the messaging of today. So
you'll own nothing and you'll be happy about it.
Yeah, right. Well, where does that leave you and I? Because I want to take care of myself. I believe I'm smart enough to make my own choices, to grow my own food, and have a community of people also in a farming community that we can survive out here. We might need metal from a smelting place in Pittsburgh or whatnot, but we can get that delivered in. Otherwise, leave us alone. We'll take care of ourselves. I don't need the nanny state telling me how to grow my own food. So, you look at the messaging across the media. Now, really, where do we go? Because you can see geopolitics is trying to grab food in addition to energy, and limitations on being able to get into stores now to purchase food. I just don't know where it takes us now, except the next logical step is more self-sufficiency from your end, your community's end. And that's the only way it can be. This whole centralized system, as you're alluding to here, is starting to fracture and crack at the edges. If you're trying to get out of China, that means that China is no longer reliable. And I'm sorry, was it the fourth port that closed this last week? Because I know Shenzhen, Tianjin, Ningbo, and Shanghai, those ports had all closed already. And then I thought there was a fifth one, a little bit. Yeah. But anyway, 4 major ports closing in China. So they don't export goods, just inbound freight food cargo like corn. And they're just,
why is China stopping exports, but they're bringing all this food in?
Yeah, they're bringing all the food in.
Why isn't that a big question that somebody asked?
Well, why are they in such an all-out effort to get all the food on the planet? They know something's coming too. They have longer records than anybody except the Arab traders. You got to go back to Arab trader days. All the Phoenicians all the way down that way. And then the Chinese, they have the oldest records. So they definitely know what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I when you're talking, what was coming through my mind is just leadership. I'm a fan of leadership. I have a master's in leadership, and I'm a student of it, and I love it. Some days I'm good at it. Some days I'm bad at it. But you asked, what would I do if I knew this stuff was coming? Well, I would have to evaluate the people that I'm in charge of. And I believe in servant leadership. I'm a Christian, as you know. I believe in the example that Jesus said, I did not come to be served, I came to serve. I think that is the best example of a leader that I've ever heard of or known of, period. There are great leaders, but that's the best example. Is I didn't come for you to serve me. I came to serve you. I came to help you become the best of yourself, because that is where I want you to be. That's a great leader. So I think if I was in charge, I would look at where my people are at, and I would want to be honest with them. And I have to have faith that they can handle it. And I wouldn't just come out and say, hey, everybody, the world's ending. We're going to have multi-cycle. That's not good leadership. That's really bad management right there. What I would say is something along the lines of slowly introducing in school curriculum, through news outlets, through outreach, the importance of self-sufficiency. And I would say, we need to get back to where y'all can can do your own thing. I would prepare my people for what is coming. I would say, and then eventually you hit them with the news like, okay, guess what? The reason we've been doing all these things is to get you ready, because we're going to be going through the crap. We're going to be going through together here, and we're going to do it together. It's not about us controlling you. I'm not some power hungry leader that needs you to, do everything I say. What I want is for us to make this through it together. And to do that, we need to stick together. We need to not have division. We need unity. We need unity of effort. We need focus, and we need people to persevere and put their efforts into places that are going to be useful. That's what I would do if I was a leader, but that's probably why I will never be elected to any position at all, is because I'm too honest, I'm too sincere, and I don't tell people what they want to hear. I tell them what they're going to need to hear, because that's what's important. So I would have taken a different tack than our leadership globally.